Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Akila, I'm your host for today. Thank you for joining us today at Unpacking Plastics, the launch event of the Alternative Materials Tool. I hope you enjoyed the insightful welcome video. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to draw your attention to some housekeeping matters. Please note that all participants will automatically be on mute, but if you would like to interact with us, please do so via the chat. You may also ask questions via the Q&A function. However, unfortunately, due to time constraints, please note that we will likely only have time to address questions regarding the tool. This event is also being recorded, and the recording will be distributed to all registrants post-event together with some further reading materials. So today you will hear from distinguished guest speakers across government, academia, NGO, and the private sector. You're also joined by over 300 of your peers from nearly 180 different organizations. So a very warm welcome to everyone. Each speaker will provide their unique perspective on plastics and the circular economy before we dive into an introduction of the new alternative materials tool. If you wish to refer to a detailed agenda, my colleague Bani will be posting a link in the chat for your reference. I would now like to welcome the CEO of WWF-Singapore, Mr. R. Raghunathan, to kick us off and deliver the opening remarks. Raghu, if you could please join us by switching on your camera and unmuting yourself. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Akila, can you hear me?
Very clear.
I'm back online now. Your Excellency, Mrs. Margaret Vonno, Ambassador of the Netherlands to Singapore and Brunei, distinguished guests, good afternoon. On behalf of WWF Singapore, thank you for joining us today. A lot has been said about plastics and its impact on nature and people. Nearly all marine species are affected by plastic in our oceans. Humans are not shielded from the plastic pollution crisis. The average person consumes a credit card's worth of plastics every week because of microplastics in our food chain. If you were at East Coast Beach in the past month, you would have witnessed the never-ending flow of plastic debris that's end up on our shores. And ocean plastics are even estimated to triple in the next 20 years. Even as we become aware of the problems, we're also seeing a wave of people, businesses, and world leaders come together to work on solutions. At WWF, we share a vision of no plastics in nature by 2030. This ambitious, time-bound goal requires all of us to work together and create change where there is the most impact. That is why we created our Plastic Action, or PACT initiative. Today, having worked with 5 industries across 8 roundtables, we are proud to share that PACT members have reduced 12 million pieces of plastic packaging and items in total. Additionally, over 1 million pieces of plastic cutlery are saved every week with our food delivery pledge. This is what PACT is all about. Collective industry action that translates to real outcomes built on solutions guided by science. Crucial to its success is the collaborative approach that companies take when engaging through PACT. It is with the same spirit that we are now tackling one of the trickiest issues that businesses face, that is packaging. COVID-19 has been a reminder of why plastic is our biggest friend and foe. It is essential for hygiene, food safety, or even personal protection in the healthcare sector. However, during the 8 weeks of the circuit breaker, Singapore generated 1.3 tons of additional plastic waste, the weight of 92 double-decker buses from takeaway and food deliveries alone. Any business that has tried to reduce or replace single-use plastics would have encountered some real issues. Switching to other materials may create an even higher environmental footprint. The local context in Singapore is also different. Therefore, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Recognizing this gap, PACT has launched the Alternative Materials Tool. It is Singapore's first tool for businesses to make informed decisions on single-use packaging. Most importantly, it is available for any business to use, big or small. Here is where the real work starts. 95% of plastic packaging material value, or approximately 80 to 120 billion US dollars annually, is lost to the economy. This needs to change. The road to recovery from this pandemic must focus on our transition to a circular economy. This requires different industries to work together, from packaging manufacturers to retail brands and end-use customers. Today's webinar brings together experts with varied perspectives on circularity and business solutions. I hope that the next hour will provide you with the insights that you need to create this change within your organization or community. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghu, for your opening remarks. So we'll now have a fireside chat with Her Excellency Margaret Vono, Ambassador of the Netherlands. The session will be moderated by Stephanie Byton, Head of Market Transformation at WWF-Singapore. Can I please invite you both to switch on your camera and unmute yourselves? Thank you. Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Akila, and thank you very much, Her Excellency, for joining us for this short fireside chat today. I know that you're personally very passionate about sustainability, and you're representing the Netherlands, a country that is really on the forefront of circular economy. The European Union has just launched the world's biggest green recovery package, and there is a clear focus on the circular economy. Could you please let us know what this really means for the circular economy in Europe, and maybe also what governments in Southeast Asia can learn from that?
Yes, I'd like to, Stephanie. It's really a pleasure being here on this webinar with a lot of people who are dedicated to changing the world a little bit, one plastic piece at a time. Well, the EU aims to make its economy sustainable by becoming climate neutral by 2050. And if we succeed, we will be the first climate neutral continent. And I think it helps us all that we have that big goal. And to get there, we have what we call the European Green Deal. It's a set of policy initiatives by the European Commission to realize this climate neutrality. And we have a plan to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean, circular economy, cut pollution and have more biodiversity. And we also are going to invest over €500 million in sustainable, profitable, climate-proof initiative. I think this is really important. I hope this is also an example or an inspiration to other parts of the world. And what helps us is the EU Circular Economy Action Plan. We will have a plastics ban in the EU, a right to repair, and lots of other legislation which helps startups and other ones who want to do better circular business to get a chance for profitable business.
Awesome, thank you. That sounds indeed promising. And we would like to ask you one further question. What's an important factor to drive impactful action for circular economy in your point of view?
I think to really make an impact, we have to work on different levels to prevent new plastic from entering the system and cleaning up what is already there. And actually, I like what you're calling a WWF, closing the loop and closing the tap. So some examples that I know from my own experience is the EU-wide plastic ban from 2021. And also that we're going to help companies to redesign their business model to become more circular, which we call Circo. And after the webinar, I can share more info on that. In the Netherlands, we have something new, what we call the materials passport for construction material. And I really like a Dutch architect, Thomas Rauw, who said, waste is material without an identity. And that's what we're trying to be, very transparent, so that you can reuse a lot of stuff that's in the current houses or offices. And what I also like is that we're working with the triple helix model. So it's government, business, and universities working together, especially on the chemical side. We have some groundbreaking innovations. And in the Netherlands now, we have started the first circular steel factory to reuse that. Lastly, what I'm proud of is that we're also working on polyester. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to recycle polyester that is colored, but we've now found some technology to change that into light polyester, white ones, and then we can recycle it. So that's something that we geeks are very excited about.
Yeah, thank you so much for these concrete examples. And I especially like the phrase of the architect. I think that really puts it nicely. So one last question more on the personal side. You have been in Singapore already a while. What is the progress that you have noticed here from businesses towards plastic? And where are the areas where you think we could still do better?
I came here August 2017 and I've noticed a lot of progress. It's not just the zero waste master plan in 2019, it was launched. When I came first to Singapore, I brought my reusable bag to the supermarket and I was the only one. And actually I didn't get a discount or anything. Now it's different. A lot of people offer you a reusable bag. It's now quite normal to use that. And I like initiatives like Bear Pack, where you can have your reusable cup or a bowl if you go out to a hawker center even, and that's becoming much more popular. I've been working with NTU a lot. We've been working with Wageningen Food Valley, and I like, for example, Professor William Chen's team that participated in the Livability Challenge this year, because I like that idea to have a sort of sustainable packaging from shrimps. That's amazing. It sounds even tasty and very helpful. And for myself as an ambassador, I try to also walk the talk. So I had plastic bottles for water. I got rid of all of them. I now have my tap water from PUB, which is great, very safe, very healthy. And I only filter it so I can offer just warm and cold water to my guests. What I've also changed is that I have my herb garden and that I don't have the packaged herbs in plastic anymore, but I try to grow my own. But I have to admit, Stephanie, that that's sometimes difficult in Singapore to really have everything survive, because the climate is harsh. And although I'm a dedicated gardener, I sometimes fail. But I think that's also part of appreciating the stuff that blooms and grows.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the personal sharing, and that you walk the talk is really inspiring. Anyway, thanks also for your time today. I know the last month had been really tough for you, and your openness and your positivity is really inspiring to all of us here. Thank you so much, Margaret. And we will also share some of the examples that you mentioned in the post-event email. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jonathan Lowe, Acting Deputy Director, Sustainability and Emerging Applications Division from the Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technology. He will share his perspective, what system change would be required in Singapore for a circular economy. Jonathan, the floor is yours. Please turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. First of all, good afternoon to Her Excellency Margaret Bono, distinguished speakers and guests. So I only have limited time, so I would like to just jump right into the sharing. So I wanted to start off the conversation with this article that was published by the World Economic Forum way back in 2016. I've really found this article compelling because as a researcher, when we look into what is written here, right, they are saying that everything that we use and throw away technically could be recycled. And the question really is, then why aren't we recycling? And very fundamentally, what they have explained in this article is a very simple equation. Whether does recycling something make economic sense? And this is the reality of the situation, and we always use this as a reference, especially as researchers, so that we do not want to reinvent the wheel. There are so many solutions, technologies that are already out there, and they are technically viable. So the question that we ask ourselves first, okay, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's ask ourselves whether we can make things faster, cheaper, better to solve the cost effectiveness question. And when we contextualize to the local Singapore context, really it boils down to, besides the fact that you need to recover the value so that it makes economic sense, but really in the Singapore context, we are looking at two main factors. Labor. So labor is increasing, and if you look at this whole value chain of circular economy, especially if you look at the back end of it, the waste management and recycling is very manual labor intensive, right? So this is a challenge that Singapore is facing. And of course, Singapore has limited land, limited space. So we have heard that Semakau Island is going to run out of space by 2035. But even if looking at those big recycling plants, we do not have the luxury to build this very centralized big plants and achieve economies of scale for recycling. So these are very existential challenges for Singapore. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So this next few slides are going to be a little bit busy, and with the limited amount of time, I will try to highlight some of what we think are possibilities. I don't want to dwell too much into the challenges. I think my distinguished speakers would be able to cover that quite extensively already. So we want to think about what are possible, some low-hanging fruits, some are still in development. So starting from the top of the value chain, us as consumers, businesses, right? We are producers, we are consumers, but as well as we are waste generators. So really the first starting point is very simple. You cannot improve what you don't measure. So simple things like waste audit and tracking. I think my principle is this is the starting point. This is the basic starting point. And then from there, you would be able to see a certain baseline. Where are you starting from? Where are the hotspots? And you could even borrow concepts of lean, right? Like lean production. How do you put in Kaizen? And these are very low-hanging fruits because when you reduce waste in your operations, you are you have cost savings, right? So these are very low-hanging fruits. And going further, of course, over time, you would like to optimize your processes. And optimizing means you are more efficient in the resources that you're consuming. And in the end, you also generate less waste, right? So next slide, please. And going down further the value chain, really, this is where I think the new trend of digital transformation, Industry 4.0, industrial Internet of Things really come to the fore. So there's this intersection between sustainability and digital transformation that I see is going to be a critical enabler for us to transition into circular economy. So I'm just giving some examples here. Of course, beyond this, there are many others. So things like how do you have smart waste bins that can tell the cleaners when to pick up the waste instead of having regular intervals, or even tell the collection trucks to come on demand, right? Rather than coming and picking up waste that is only half filled and wasting the trip. So in a sense, that also helps to reduce the emissions from the tailpipe of the trucks. And then you could optimize the collection as well. And with now with AI automation, you can even overcome this limitation of labor constraints by making the trucks more autonomous. So these are actually R&D that is already going on, and possibilities that we can think about in order to overcome some of these bottlenecks in transitioning to the circular economy. Right, so next slide, please. Yeah, so going down further the value chain, concepts more with regard to business model innovation, borrowing concepts of sharing economy or Uberization, right? I think these are some of the concepts that could be deployed in enabling circular economy. So one of the major bottlenecks for recyclers are the heavy capital expenditure that they need to invest in. So why not share this capital cost, right? And of course, related to this, so I'm going to skip to the next block. Instead of having those big, large recycling facilities, why not we have more compact micro recycling systems that could be deployed in the urban environment and closer to the point of waste generation, right? So these are some paradigm shift that needs to happen. And of course, the other major bottleneck is the waste, mixing it up. the mix of waste that actually degrades the recyclability, the recycled material properties, right? So if we can automate these processes, not only we increase the recycling rate, but we also alleviate the problems of labor costs, right? And then, of course, finally, how we can think about how do we make waste valorization again more cost effective? Can they be faster, cheaper, and better? Right. So next slide, please. Thank you. And to stitch all this together, really, at the end of the day, we need science-based tools. So science-based tools like, for example, life cycle assessment. I'm a huge advocate for this, right? And I'm happy. It's also, I'm just going to do some marketing for the tool that's going to be launched today. So what I understand is this tool is built on LCA, life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis. And looking forward to looking at the demo. But really, these tools will be able to support and inform better decisions in order for us to not just design products for circularity, but really design the whole system for circularity. And in doing that, it also helps us to avoid what we call this issue of problem shifting, and even potentially avoid issues of rebound effects. And if all these are done well, of course, there are other possibilities that this is not comprehensive enough to cover. I truly believe that we can, transition to a circular economy, which, okay, next slide, please. Just very quickly, just to stitch things together. And next slide, please. To sum up what I've been saying, is at the end of the day, really, what is stopping us from a transition to a circular economy? It boils down to whether our solutions are cost effective enough, whether we have the ability to scale these solutions and technologies. Right? And then the second thing is going back to this science-based tools. Can we use them so that we are able to apply life cycle thinking, avoiding this whole issue of problem shifting, right? And maybe some people will be offended when I say this. It is really mind-boggling for me when people make a decision just off the cuff, saying that, okay, I'm going to replace all my plastic bags with, say, paper bags because they are greener, right? Can we have a more scientific or evidence-based approach to making such decisions? And finally, really to allow this transition, we really need to collectively, collaboratively, and decisively take action. And I believe with all these factors considered, we will be able to realize our vision of a circular economy for Singapore. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Jonathan, for those insights. And yeah, I think actually you grabbed the point very, very nicely about shifting the environmental impact simply from one material to the other, or from one system to the other. So thanks for highlighting this, and thanks for taking the time. If anyone has questions to Jonathan, he was so kind to offer to answer them in the chat. So please use our Q&A function and direct some questions to Jonathan, so she can answer them now, or then we can answer them after the event in our post-event email. I would like now to take just 5 minutes to introduce our PACT program. And PACT actually stands for Plastic Action and was founded around 2 years ago. It recognizes the important role that businesses can play to solve the issues of overuse of plastic and plastic pollution. So this gives a little bit of overview how PACT works. So we do have 2 different approaches. So we have on the one side individual commitments where really companies set individual targets to drastically reduce their consumption of plastics. And we do work on sectoral collaboration where we target unnecessary plastics, which are easiest to remove from an entire business model in order to create impact at scale. And finally, we provide businesses with guidance, resources, and tools to help them along the way. Many of you might be familiar with this slide or with this overview. It is aligned to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the Circular Economy Principles. So just to summarize quickly our pact guiding principles, which is eliminate all unnecessary plastics and ideally switch to better alternatives. Then rethink business models to reduce any materials and increase the recyclability, which also Jonathan mentioned just before. There needs to be a better collection of packaging and a better recycling, as you just heard. And of course, to prevent plastic leaking into nature. As for the sectoral collaboration, we are working across entire business sectors to create impact at scale and to avoid also that one forward-thinking company gets backlash from consumers. Together with industry experts, we identified the so-called low-hanging fruit to reduce unnecessary plastic, such as the no straw pledge or a charge on bags, or the food delivery pledge that Raghu mentioned before. It was signed last year, and only with an automated opt-out of cutlery, it saves over 1 million pieces of plastic every year. I also would like to underline at this point that single-use packaging can never be really sustainable, but we also recognize that there are situations where maybe bring your own cannot be applied. And in these cases, we recommend to switch to the alternatives with the lowest environmental impact. So then obviously companies were all asking us, which is the best alternative for plastics? And I think that's the big question of this, this session today. And it is not simple to answer. There are so many different materials like paper, glass, and aluminium, and at least 7 different types of plastic. And this is why we created the Alternative Materials tool. It offers businesses a simple way to select materials with the lowest environmental impact. And we will shortly hear more about the tool. In addition to these tools, we also work on research projects, have industry-specific roundtables, and fund conservation projects under PACT. As for our individual commitments, we work closely with each of the businesses to set specific goals and deadlines. We also help them overcome some of their challenges and measure their progress. And our full impact report, which we just launched a month ago, can be found on our website, which is plastic-action.asia. Which brings me to my last slide. These are our so-called PACT champions, businesses across various industries that signed with us the PACT commitment. And we would be very delighted to welcome new businesses. So whoever is in the audience and is interested to work with us, please drop us a note. I'm also glad to have with us today one of our PACT champions. Nicholas Clayton is the CEO of Capella Hotel Group, which is part of Pontiac Lenk Group, who was one of our first PACT signees. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us here today. And may I invite you to share some of the challenges that you had to reduce plastics, and maybe also how the AMT could help your team to find better materials. If you could turn on your camera and unmute yourself, then over to you.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be in this important forum representing Pontiac Land Group and Capella Hotel Group. Thank you very much. We're proud to be part of the PAC initiative for 4 different reasons. The first reason is there's strength in numbers, and I think we'll just be more effective together. We also can learn from one another as members and share best practices within the larger group. The second reason is because this initiative supports our guiding principles of being an involved and contributing member of the local community in which we serve. It also establishes best practices for us here in Singapore that we're able to then export to our other hotels internationally and spread the benefit throughout the group and throughout all of our destinations. And lastly, it's extremely motivating for our colleagues to be part of the PACT initiative because our colleagues care about the environment and they care about the future of their children. So this suits us for many different reasons. As an organization, we're proud to be part of PACT and would like to do as much as possible to preserve our environment. As hotel operators, there are 2 distinct areas that we kind of focused in on as it related to single-use plastics. The first being kind of in the area of guest amenities and our operating supplies that we use at the hotels. In many cases, of course, those materials were plastic or single-use plastics, and we were able to make a kind of a sea change in our materials used and the number of materials used in both the process of serving our guests and serving our colleagues. Just a historical note, in previous years, between the 4 owned hotel properties here in Singapore, I think we were going through approximately 2 million plastic bottles of water every year. So it's an awful figure that I now look back on as a business person and as a member of our global community with great embarrassment that we as an industry were perpetuating such a poor practice. We've made that shift and eliminated that completely. Of course, we also have very environmentally friendly guest room amenities and guest supplies that we're using, a big shift again. Also in the area of food and beverage, a lot of the packaging, a lot of the to-go containers that we were using and the things to support a guest experience were made of plastic, and we have shifted that out. Fortunately, there were, in our supply network, there were lots of clever entrepreneurial suppliers who have come up with some very ingenious examples of some alternatives for us. And so right away, the market shifted, and we've taken advantage of it by partnering with suppliers who have this conscientious mentality and are there to support hotels wanting to do the right thing and to really work to make the colleagues proud and the customers feel comfortable with the service that they're getting and the experience in general. We also have daily deliveries of products that come to our hotels, and this would be true of the industry at large, but I'm speaking here in Singapore. We have a laundry supplier that does dry cleaning and processes our terry and linen every day. They do our uniforms. We have beverage suppliers that bring beverage orders to our hotel. We have raw food products, fish, meat, fruit, vegetables. All of these partners have been evaluated to ensure that as they bring their products to our docks, to our loading docks, and go through that rigorous inspection process before it comes into the hotel, we've insisted that we partner with suppliers who understand our objectives and are not using single-use plastics in that process of delivery. We also, of course, we find it particularly helpful and critical actually to create teams in our hotels when we have anything important that we want to manage. When we talk about risk in our business, well, we have a risk committee in our hotels, and they focus on guest safety, colleague safety, and the mitigation of risk. Well, we take the same approach with sustainability, and we have committees in our hotels that meet monthly and minute their progress, have follow-up notes, and really push along all of our sustainability initiatives throughout the hotels, everything from water conservation, power conservation, and certainly a prime topic has been the single-use plastic issue for us because it's been so front and center. So that's a little bit about some of the things where we've made big sea changes over these last 18 months to 24 months. I think if I talk about challenges, of course, the recent pandemic has been a big one for us. Basically, the epidemic has created a situation where we had an immediate need to respond to protect the safety and security of our colleagues and certainly our guests. And in doing so, we simply had to immediately move to procure some items specifically around personal protective equipment that was packaged in a way that was not particularly helpful. And some of the things that we would extend to customers for their own safety, they were packaged in a way that is, again, not really consistent with our ethos. So this is something that we're working with our suppliers on, making a pivot to have more effective packaging. But it was a quick reaction to a global event, and we needed to still do business. And so this did set us back a bit, but I think it's been a minor challenge that we can overcome in the months and the years ahead. The AMT, I had to kind of catch myself so I didn't say ATM. The AMT, I think for us will be a phenomenal tool because basically it helps us to achieve a few objectives. One, to accomplish our objectives around sustainability and the reduction of use of plastics overall. And it helps us to still meet our specifications. We still need to make sure that we have specifications met and that the tools we use, the products we use, storage things we use, vessels that we use are really going to meet our needs and as a business. And so I think this is a great tool, and we look forward to full integration into our procurement for all of our hotels. And we thank WWF and the PACT initiative for developing this tool and making it so readily available. As I think about the forum today and how important it is, it's kind of a great call to action. I look at these opportunities as a way to take what is important and create even a greater sense of awareness, a greater purpose behind, in our busy days, lots coming at us, lots of priorities. We have our business objectives or KPIs. We have our moral imperatives, what we've promised our colleagues, what we've promised our owners. And I think it's very important to keep things top of mind. So I really appreciated being part of today's discussion, sharing a little bit, learning a little bit, and making sure that I make a even greater commitment to our sustainable practices as an organization. I'm not going to tell you specifically my age, but I'll leave it to say that I was raised in the Americas, in the West Coast of the United States in the 60s and 70s. And one of our favorite pastimes as a family was camping and going out on family picnics and camping trips. We did that quite often. And I think back to those times and I think of the pristine and natural, untouched beauty of the wilderness and the places we visited with great fondness. And then I consider what I think about today. I think about my daughters. Now I have a grandson that's just been born. And I think about them and I think about that will they have that same opportunity? Will we be able to pass this on to others in our lifetime? I feel like there's been a tremendous amount of environmental degradation over my lifetime. I feel like it's been on my watch personally, and I'd like to do everything possible to try to contribute to a better, more sustainable business practice and how that may impact our environment. So thank you very much for your opportunity to be part of this forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Thanks for your sharing. Really appreciated all those insights. And also, of course, to all our distinguished guest speakers for your time. I hope the multi-stakeholder sharing has inspired everyone here to take the much needed plastic action for circular economy in your respective organizations. Obviously, if you have questions for any of our speakers, please do put them in the Q&A function. We'll try as much as possible to respond to them. So in this next half of today's session, Dr. Yvonne Lin, materials expert of WWF-Singapore, will take you through our newly launched alternative materials tool. But before that, we have a video for you for a brief first look into the tool that Nicholas, Stephanie, and John has already very briefly mentioned. So enjoy. So which alternatives is really the best? With the alternative materials tool, you can choose the most environmentally friendly type of packaging in 5 easy steps. First, select the packaging type that you're looking for. Second, select your preferred packaging size. Third, select the location relevant to you because the recommendations are specific to your local context. Fourth, select the packaging features that you're looking for. And finally, load the results and compare the data between different materials. The higher the score, the less environmental impact that material has. Great, so over to you, Yvonne, if you could turn on your camera and unmute yourself.
Yes, hi everyone. Give me a second while I share my screen. Yeah, hi, thank you, Akila, and hello everybody. Yes, as you can see from that very, very short video, it has already briefly touched on like how do you enter and select the functions over here to get into the tool here. I think before I give more brief into how the tool works, let me give you all a bit more background on the tool. As you can see, we actually analyze more than 20 materials using life cycle analysis. We actually look at the different stages of the material from production, which includes the raw material extraction, to the end of life, where the waste treatment, which depends on the country where the packaging material is going to be disposed. So the tool is looking at mono materials with the focus on single-use packaging. So what is mono material? So mono materials actually refers to packaging product that is actually made with only one material. So for example, you can see in the list here, we have paper that's being ranked here. It's actually a mono material. So what this actually means is that it is not waterproof. So for example, if you are actually thinking about takeaway cups, for example, you will really have to select the waterproof here. And of course, there's safe for contact with food. And then you'll realize that the paper will drop off from the ranking. So beverage carton that you see here is the only multi-layered material in the tool because this packaging type is just so common that we really have to include it here. So let's maybe take a bit deeper look at the tool now. As you can see from the video, you can actually click on the materials and then you have this description here on the materials. And let's take a deeper look at this table here. So we have mentioned that this is actually based on the life cycle analysis. So what we have tried to do is to make this tool as simple enough for everyone to understand when they look at it. So you can see that it comes from the production, which is the upstream. And then it goes all the way to the end of life, like I mentioned just now, which is the downstream. And you can see a very simple ranking of the numbers here at the side. So what this is useful is that you can actually choose, say, for example, now you're curious, why is a recycled paper better than a virgin paper, for example? And you can just click on them in this, and they will be placed side by side. And immediately you can just compare based on the numbers. I mean, of course, the higher the number, the less impact the material has to the environment. So what you can see is that, hey, you know, out of all the scoring, it seems like virgin paper doesn't fare as well in the production and circularity. What happens is you can actually also expand this further, and you can see the subcategory under the production. So under here, you can look at the energy used to produce this paper, this material, the GHG emission, water depletion, and of course the land use. And you can see that under virgin paper, the land use doesn't fare very well. And that is because the paper, you really have to take note that actually paper comes from trees, and trees do occupy the land. And so that kind of considerations, that factor would have to be taken into considerations. And based on this very simple qualitative way of naming, it gives us a very, very easy understanding to know that, oh, hey, so this is where it doesn't fare very well and pulls down the ranking. The other one, which also on the toxicity, which is at the upstream, during the manufacturing, some kind of chemicals will always have to be used to make the paper. And you can see that the toxicity for the virgin paper is actually a bit worse than recycled paper. But of course, when it comes to using the toxicity where it's being used, both green papers, they will definitely be quite safe when being used. Next, we come to circularity. So under here, we actually are very interested to know whether is this material recycled material. So there is a recycled for paper, then it's a yes, and for the virgin paper, then it's a no. And what's interesting next that I'd like to touch a bit more is on compostability and recyclability. So these two terms on hindsight, you may think that, so this material paper, it is compostable. Why is it showing as bad? So if you hover around this eye, you will actually see this pop-up explanation. So we don't just think about the material itself, is it compostable? So for paper, it is compostable, but in Singapore, do we actually compost them? So the answer is no, not really. So when you combine these two factors into this compostability factor here, that's where both recycled paper and virgin paper actually doesn't fare that well, because in Singapore, we don't really compost paper. But in Singapore, we do recycle paper. So as you can see in the recyclability is the same as compostability. You do take into considerations whether how much the material has been taken to recycle. So because paper is quite highly recycled, of course, compared to plastics. So you find that when combining these two factors, you get very good for both recycled paper and of course paper. Of course, when it comes to likelihood to be reused, paper is not really a good material to be reused. So it's just a very simple, very bad. And we also look at littering. And in the littering, we look at what kind of damage to the environment when this is leaked. So for paper, this is where it comes in looking quite good, which is low, meaning that it doesn't have that bad impact when it is being littered. And this is probably also why, as Jonathan said, when it comes to looking at paper and to replace plastics, people tend to jump to paper, because when paper is leaked into the environment, it is more safe compared to plastics. Of course, and lastly, we have to come to the end of the life cycle of the material. And because being recycled, whether it's a recycled paper or virgin paper, this is actually pretty much the same. Because in Singapore, we take into considerations that most of our waste is actually incinerated. But like I mentioned just now, recycling of paper is pretty high. We do recycle quite a fair bit of paper in Singapore. So we do take that into considerations when we look at the energy use, the GHG emissions, toxicity, water depletion, and land use as during the production stage. And you can see that because for both of them, it's actually the same material, so they have fared the same. So you can see that basically where recycled paper actually fare better than paper in terms of this kind of overall scoring is really on the upfront production stage. So we sometimes we hear conflicting reports on which materials is truly better for the environment. And you can see from the tool here that every material have a slightly different ranking when it comes to the different stages of their material life. So I think that is where it may contribute some kind of confusion. It's just like back to the paper versus plastics old tale. People would rather use paper because we as consumers, we tend to see the end of life of the material more. And then we will think that, oh, paper is less harmful for the environment compared to plastics. But what this AMT is able to do is to take actually all these different stages and combine it to give an overall score, which is what you see over here. And what businesses can do is to make use of this tool and to get a clear ranking of the different materials, and then we can compare them and then make science-based decisions on the single-use packaging materials that they want. And lastly, this tool is actually free. It's placed on our PAC website. You just need to do a simple registration and you are free to use it. And it's not limited to businesses, but open to everyone. So this is a very brief introduction on the AMT, and I will take some questions from the floor. Thank you.
Hi, thanks Yvonne for taking us through the tool. I do actually have some questions for you to follow up before we open the floor to questions. So I'm going to ask some questions that we frequently receive, and I'm sure you get this question a lot. I've already seen the chat, some people asking this question. So what's the best material based on the AMT results?
Oh, this is really, yeah, we get asked quite a lot of times, like once we have this tool is, which is the best material. And I would say that there's really no best material, as every material has an impact on the environment if you are not using it properly or collecting it for proper disposal. So I would like to actually emphasize that single-use packaging can never be sustainable due to its high usage and disposable nature. We always try to encourage businesses to prioritize reusable packaging where possible, and only use single-use packaging when necessary. So what this tool really does is to guide us to choose a material with the lowest possible footprint for single-use packaging, while we continue to work on reusable and sharing scheme.
Okay, so I know you already touched a bit on composting, but does this mean that even biodegradable and compostable packaging are not the best materials here?
Biodegradable plastics and other such materials are great materials in their own rights. It really depends on how and where you are using them. So what AMT really just tells us that if a material is compostable, but yet not composted after use, then the downstream rating of such material will be put down. So a good example would be in Singapore, where industrial composting facilities are not yet available for such waste material. So we don't really get, we don't always get the bioplastics being ranked too high.
Okay, and how about the worst material from the AMT? I'm sure everyone likes to hear about that too.
Yes, on contrary, actually, there seems to be a worse material in the most scenario, and it is the expanded polystyrene, which also commercially known as styrofoam. This would come out bottom most of the time because it's actually not economically viable to carry out a collecting system for styrofoam. So in the tool, this is actually considered as not recyclable. And also due to its lightweight nature, it has a higher chance of getting blown out as litter. So imagine seeing all the little pieces of styrofoam broken down into plastics pieces in nature. It's not very nice.
Yeah. Definitely. And you know, earlier in your live demo, you demonstrated the difference between recycled paper and virgin paper, and recycled paper had a higher score. And also, you know, Dr. Loh in his presentation, he mentioned the point about, you know, using LCA to eventually design for circularity. So why is using recycled materials so important here?
So as the tool has shown us, usually at the production stage, a recycled material has a lower environmental footprint than if you extract right from the virgin material. And this is actually true for most mono materials. So if you think about it in the context of circular economy, so what recycling helps is to close the loop. We always emphasize also impact that we need to close the loop. So I think this goes very well and gels very well with what the tool is showing us.
Great. And a last question from me. You know, there's been a lot of very exciting new material innovations. I mean, I've read about really interesting novel materials such as seaweed-based plastics. Earlier, the ambassador also shared about the work coming up from NTU and Dr. William Chen. Are these, you know, novel materials also assessed in the tool? What materials specifically are being looked at?
Well, it's really great to see so many new materials that have taken resources from byproducts such as the shrimp shell that you mentioned, and making them into packaging products. Otherwise, anyway, all this would have been thrown away anyway. Unfortunately, these materials are not ranked in the AMT as it's pretty new because we need to do the LCA calculation. So we do need some kind of data to do the calculations, and unfortunately, these are not available. So this is not currently assessed in the tool. So what the tool AMT aims is to provide the users with guidance on the material's impact on the environment. So as I mentioned just now, we have over 20 materials that has been assessed. So these are actually commercially available materials, which is like the different types of plastics, cotton, paper, aluminum, tin, etc. But the thing is that it may or may not be commonly used or available in the Singapore market.
Okay, great. And really apologies to everyone. We are running a tight schedule right now, and I know we're running short on time. We've got 4 minutes left to the end of this event. But it seems like we do have quite a number of questions coming in. If you do have time, please do stay on if you can for the next 5 to 10 minutes while we address as many questions as we can from the floor. So Yvonne, I've got a question here from Ting Ting Ng. May I know if the AMT can be used to calculate the LCA for products using biodegradable polymers like PLA and thermoplastic starch and etc.?
Yes, we actually have PLA in our tool. So that is definitely being ranked. Probably just not because of the selections that are used for the demo that didn't appear, but also maybe because that it's not ranking very high, so it didn't appear, but it's definitely considered in the AMT.
Okay, and then I've got a question from, apologies if I'm pronouncing your name wrongly, Cao Tan Xiao. I applaud WWF's efforts to perform and compare LCAs of different materials. Thank you. My question is, how does the tool account for petrochemicals at the start of the life cycle? Does it begin when crude oil is pumped out of the ground? Does it take into account, 1, the externalities of the crude oil industry, 2, the fact that fossil-based hydrocarbons are finite, and 3, the marginal cost of adding more carbons into our atmosphere?
Wow, that's a very, very technical questions. Thank you for that question. Our LCA, actually, we are basing on the eco-invent data. So basically, under the eco-invent, we have to take into considerations the raw material extractions and all that. But details like this, I'm unable to share everything here. Probably if you're interested to know more, you can email us and then we can see what else we can share. But definitely we have to take into considerations the materials extractions of the fossil fuels, etc.
Okay. And sorry, I'm just multitasking here and checking for the questions that we're receiving. We've got a question from Tom Peacock Nazil. Just playing the tool, why are all reusable bag alternatives have a bad score? Am I correct in assuming that this only takes into account the manufacturing process and not the multi-use case?
Well, what happened is under the ranking of reusable bags is that we are considering that the bag is, well, if it's made to consider for reuse, then we are making it a bit thicker than the normal kind of plastic bags that you usually see in the retail stores. So when the material is being used as more, then of course that would have a more impact to the environment. As for the number of times of reuse, you are right in that we don't really consider how many times will be reused. So if you are thinking of doing using a reusable bag, yes, you do need to take into consideration the number of times that to be reused, but that is not being considered here.
Okay, I'm just looking for a question. Right, I've got a question from Martina. How do you avoid that the hospitality sector is now choosing materials for single-use items and packaging which are ranked yellow, which is better than the red, but still are increasing volume of waste and end up on landfills or in incineration, specifically in countries where waste management is insufficient?
This is actually a very, very tough topic, as the question has mentioned, especially in countries where the waste management system is probably not so good. I think what WWF we come in our role is really to help to guide businesses to look at their usage, their commodities, what they are using. And we try to identify what kind of packaging that they can to eliminate that is not necessary, or to look at how we can rethink their business models, or to look at where we can come in with a reusable instead. So we are working very hard with businesses, and of course, as Nicholas just now also have come in and share his thoughts. Sometimes it's actually not as straightforward, but that's where we are all coming together and making that effort, and hoping that this tool will also give a clearer idea, because it is science-based. It gives us a clearer idea what kind of materials that is better for the environment, and then we try to also convince more and more businesses to make the switch to a less impactful material. But of course, reduce and reuse is still the best policy.
Great, thank you. So I guess that ties in back to Stephanie's presentation on the PACT guiding principles, and also what Dr. Loh had shared, in terms of designing with circularity in mind. So eliminating all unnecessary packaging and opting for reusables where possible. I know there's a lot of questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time at the moment. We have a lot of questions specifically around the methodology. We will be posting a link to our website, which details, the methodology behind the tool. If you're interested to know more, please do head over to our website and read. It's a page full of information, so hopefully you'll be able to find the answers that you're looking for. However, if you do have additional questions, feel free to email us, and I can wrap up here. Unfortunately, we've had to cut short the Q&A, but thanks so much for joining us today. We've had nearly 300 people in attendance today, so thank you very much, and for staying on a little later than expected. If you're here representing a company, and if you'd like to take plastic action, or if you have any questions, around the alternative materials tool, we're happy to have that conversation with you. Feel free to drop us an email or visit our website for more information. The contact links are here on screen. I also encourage everyone here to sign your support for the WWF Global Plastic Treaty that we are advocating for at yourplasticdiet.org. My colleague Bani will be very kindly pasting the links in the chat so that you will have easy access to that. And that's it from us today. So thank you so much again for joining us, and have a good rest of your day. Bye.